The upcoming Snow White remakes have ignited a cultural firestorm, with Rachel Zegler's reimagined version facing intense criticism, and Brett Cooper's traditional portrayal garnering enthusiastic support. Fans and critics alike are divided, and the debate is dominating conversations about Hollywood's approach to remakes. Ziggler's modernized interpretation of Snow White, which abandons many of the beloved elements of the 1937 Disney classic, stands in stark contrast to Cooper's more traditional take in Snow White and the Evil Queen, a production by the Daily Wire's streaming service, Bentkey. These two radically different renditions have become symbolic of a broader cultural clash, the tug-of-war between preserving classic storytelling and adapting tales for contemporary audiences. Rachel Zegler's version of Snow White has taken a bold departure from the original fairy tale, opting for a storyline centered on self-discovery and empowerment. In this modern retelling, Snow White isn't searching for her prince. Instead, she's focused on leading, growing, and realizing her potential. Inspired by her father's words, Zegler's Snow White portrays a strong, independent woman, far removed from the damsel-in-distress archetype that defined the character in Disney's 1937 classic. While some praise the effort to add depth and agency to the character, many fans feel betrayed by the drastic changes. The romantic storyline of the original, filled with hope and magic, was never just about love. It represented innocence, trust, and the enchanting ideals that made the original so beloved. Adding to the controversy are Zegler's pointed remarks about the 1937 film. She has openly criticized its portrayal of romance, even going so far as to label Prince Charming a creepy stalker. These comments have struck a nerve with longtime Disney fans, who see them as dismissive of the nostalgia and charm that define the original. For many, Prince Charming was an integral part of the story, symbolizing a pure and idealized version of love. Zegler's critique has sparked a heated debate about whether cherished stories should remain untouched or evolve to align with modern sensibilities. To many, her perspective feels like a rejection of the values that made the original story timeless. On the other hand, Brett Cooper's portrayal of Snow White in Snow White and the Evil Queen has been met with overwhelming support, particularly among fans weary of Hollywood's modern remakes. Known for her outspoken conservative views, Cooper has expressed a clear desire to honor the traditional elements of the character. Her Snow White embraces the classic fairy tale's themes of romance, innocence, and happily ever after endings. In stark contrast to Zegler's independent, leadership-driven Snow White, Cooper's rendition celebrates the simplicity and charm of the original story. This return to tradition resonates with fans who feel that modern adaptations often stray too far from the essence of the tales they aim to reimagine. The Daily Wire's decision to cast Cooper and produce a faithful adaptation of Snow White is seen as a deliberate cultural statement. By preserving the romantic elements and the prince's role in the story, the studio is positioning itself as a defender of classic storytelling. This move challenges Disney's current trend of revising beloved narratives to reflect contemporary social themes. For fans of the original, Cooper's casting feels like a win, a reassurance that not all fairy tales need to be reshaped to fit modern values. Instead, her version embraces the escapism and nostalgia that many argue are the heart of such stories. Social media has become a battleground for this debate. Supporters of Cooper's version have rallied under hashtags like #NotMeSnowWhite, expressing their disapproval of Zegler's interpretation. Memes, posts, and nostalgic reflections celebrate Cooper's portrayal as the true Snow White, with many fans praising the Daily Wire for creating a film that honors the fairy tale's roots. Critics of Zegler's Snow White argue that her version undermines the magic of the original, replacing its charm with themes that feel overly political. For these fans, the loss of the romantic storyline is especially disappointing, as they see it as a core element of what made the original film so enchanting. Zegler's interviews have only added fuel to the fire. Her repeated description of the original Snow White as outdated and her dismissal of its romantic storyline as antiquated have deepened the divide. To Zegler, Snow White's independence and ambition are more fitting for modern audiences than the fairy tale ending of finding true love. However, her critics argue that her approach comes across as disdainful of the values that made the original story iconic. While Zegler's Snow White is a figure of empowerment, her detractors see her interpretation as a departure that loses sight of what made the story resonate with generations of fans. In contrast, Cooper's take has struck a chord with those who feel Hollywood has gone too far in its attempts to modernize classic narratives. The Daily Wire's adaptation is seen not just as a nostalgic throwback, but as a purposeful stand against the relentless reimagining of beloved tales. Cooper's Snow White embodies the innocence and magic of the original, offering a respite from the modern trend of revisionist storytelling. For her supporters, she represents a commitment to preserving the timelessness of fairy tales, proving that not every story needs to be reinvented to stay relevant. The debate over Snow White has grown to represent a larger cultural conversation. On one side are those who champion Ziggler's interpretation as a necessary evolution, arguing that stories must adapt to reflect the values of younger generations. To them, Ziggler's Snow White is a progressive heroine, showing that women can pursue independence and leadership without needing to rely on romance. On the other side are fans of Cooper's portrayal, who see it as a defense of traditional storytelling and an acknowledgement of the enduring power of simple, heartfelt narratives. They argue that not every classic needs to be modernized, and that fairy tales can still resonate without being reimagined. Even within Disney, the tension surrounding Zegler's Snow White is evident. Reports suggest that executives have clashed over how to market the film, with some advocating for a more cautious approach to avoid alienating traditional fans. This internal struggle mirrors the broader public debate as Disney grapples with balancing progressivism and nostalgia in its storytelling. The studio's decision to frame Snow White as an independent character reflects a broader industry trend aligning with contemporary social values, but in its come at the cost of alienating a portion of its audience. The divide over Snow White highlights the challenges Hollywood faces in trying to please increasingly polarized audiences. Ziggler's version may appeal to those seeking representation and modern values, but Cooper's portrayal taps into a deep yearning for stories that feel timeless and unaltered. This debate extends beyond the film itself, raising questions about who gets to decide how beloved tales are retold and whether those decisions should prioritize tradition or progress. Ultimately, the Snow White controversy underscores the power of storytelling to spark conversation and controversy. Whether audiences gravitate toward Cooper's faithful adaptation or Zegler's bold reimagining, it's clear that this tale has become more than just a fairy tale. It's a reflection of the cultural shifts shaping Hollywood and the differing expectations audiences bring to the stories they love. As the release dates for both films approach, the buzz surrounding these two versions of Snow White is only intensifying. The question remains, should Snow White be reimagined to reflect modern values, or should she remain a symbol of classic fairy tale charm? Both sides are passionate, and the outcome will likely influence how studios approach similar projects in the future. One thing is certain, this is a debate that won't be settled anytime soon, and the story of Snow White, no matter which version wins the audience's heart, is far from over.